Hello and welcome. The arrest warrant for Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir has sparked a fiery debate around the world, with people asking, was it the right thing to do? And is it in the best interests of resolving the crisis in Darfur? The warrant issued by the International Criminal Court in The Hague fell short of accusing President Bashir of genocide, but it did accuse him of war crimes and crimes against humanity for what is taking place in Darfur. For the past 6 years, the western region of Sudan has witnessed an uprising against the central government in Khartoum, with citizens demanding a more equitable distribution of the country's resources and wealth. The United Nations says 300,000 people have been killed, a figure the Sudanese government refutes, saying it's closer to 10,000. Either way, millions have been displaced, villages have been razed, and women have been systematically raped. And today we ask, will the ICC's arrest warrant for President Bashir hurt or help the situation in Darfur? Remember, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE and enter the chat room and take part. And we, of course, will welcome your phone calls on the show as well. One of the most prominent Western figures to come to President Bashir's side has been the Reverend Franklin Graham, the head of the evangelical and relief organization Samaritan's Purse, which is active in Sudan. He's also CEO of the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association and a spiritual advisor of the former President George W. Bush. The Reverend Franklin Graham wrote an editorial in one of America's leading newspapers, the New York Times, entitled "Put Peace Before Justice," which criticized the decision to issue an arrest warrant for the Sudanese president. And he met with Mr. Bashir in Khartoum when the warrant was issued last Wednesday. The Reverend Franklin Graham joins us today from his headquarters in Boone, North Carolina. And from Chicago, we're joined by Ambassador Richard Williamson, the former U.S. presidential envoy to Sudan, who just stepped down in January. His post has not yet been filled by the Obama administration. Ambassador Williamson endorsed the move to arrest the Sudanese president. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. And Reverend Franklin Graham, if I could start with you, sir, please. You wrote that op-ed in the New York Times, as I mentioned, entitled "Put Peace Before Justice." Does that mean that you believe that peace should be achieved at pretty much any cost?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. The situation in Darfur and also in the South Sudan is very critical. And right now, anything could be used to blow this whole thing up. The comprehensive peace agreement between the North and the South has to be fully implemented. The government of Khartoum has been stalling on a number of issues, and these have got to be resolved. Darfur is a very difficult situation with many different groups not only fighting among themselves but fighting the government. You have outside forces such as Chad and Libya that are also involved in Darfur. This is not an easy situation, but you have hundreds of thousands, millions of people whose lives are at risk. And right now, the people that we're wanting to help, the people whose lives that we're wanting to save, are more at risk today because of what the ICC did last Wednesday. Mr. Bashir, President Bashir, we need him at the table right now. He is the one who signed on to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. He is the one, I believe, that can also help to bring stability to Darfur. Okay. But if you want to alienate him, then he's not going to come to the table, and he's going to play up to his constituency, his political base, and that's exactly what's happened. You have 8 agencies now that are being expelled because of what the ICC did. I'm not saying what the ICC did was wrong. I'm not here to debate whether they had the right facts or did or did not have the right facts. I'm just saying their report at this time is causing further damage to the peace process. Okay. It has not helped one bit.
So thank you. Well, let's get Ambassador Williamson in here and ask, in your opinion, Ambassador, how important is it that the ICC follows through with its efforts to detain the Sudanese leader?
Well, first let me just comment on Reverend Graham and his organization that's doing terrific relief work in southern Sudan. Having spent a lot of time in Rumbek, Juba, Akuk, and Abyei, I'm well aware of that, and I thank him. But I think the point is we should believe and be committed to accountability. But to the point that the Reverend makes, on March 3rd, 2.7 million Darfuris were in IDP camps and refugee camps, driven from their homes because of coordinated attacks by the government of Sudan, followed by the Janjaweed, the so-called devils on horseback and camel. On March 5th, the day after the ICC, those same 2.7 million suffering souls were living in desperate conditions. Let me suggest that, in my view, we shouldn't allow ourselves to be manipulated, that the real issue is the government of Sudan's responsibility to protect, its responsibility to provide care for its own people. Unfortunately, as they have done in the past, they have used events to manipulate the international community when it served their purpose, and they have used these suffering souls that have already been victimized as pawns in that game.
Ambassador, if I may put an email to you. So there's an email that actually, if I may put to you, it says, it's from Pakistan, from a viewer by the name of Rizwan, who says, serving heads of states cannot be prosecuted. This warrant is an illegal act in itself. Again, this points towards the bias of the international community. Instead of making sincere effort to bring peace and prosperity in the region, the West's preference is war and poverty. Obviously, this is a viewer's perspective, and I wonder, Ambassador, if you can see how some nations and some viewers might see the ICC's moves as being Western biased, that it never happens to Western nations, but it targeted Africa.
I would suggest to that individual in Pakistan who sent the email to reflect that in the last 15 years there have been a variety of ways to seek restorative justice. And it began in Yugoslavia, where sitting President Milosevic was indicted. Later there was an indictment of Charles Taylor in Liberia. At the time, again, some said, well, this is going to make it impossible to get peace, yet in both cases progress was made toward peace. The International Criminal Court, which the United States is not a member of, has acted on its own on the evidence they were given and made their determination. I encourage President Bashir and the government of Sudan to engage with the ICC. If they feel they can rebut these charges, they should go ahead and do it. But the principle of accountability is important, whomever it is, if it's Milosevic, if it's Charles Taylor, and the principle of a government's responsibility to protect and care for its own people is important, whether that government is found in Africa, in the Balkans, or anywhere else in the world.
Reverend Graham, if I could put this email in contrast that came in from Washington to you. It's from Tony Chopkowski, who's in Washington, D.C., in the USA, who says, now we are left with a merciless dictator and a severely oppressed people now with no recourse to outside help. In this case, just where does this kind of diplomacy and rectification of matters take us? How do you respond to this view of people who feel that essentially if action isn't taken against the president, that basically they are left in danger?
Well, there are a lot of bad people in this world, and there are a lot of dictators, such as Mugabe in the southern part of Africa. But you still have to deal with those people that are in power. Nobody's going to come down and arrest President Bashir. He's going to be protected by his people. He's going to be protected by every Muslim nation in the world and other non-Muslim nations. He's free to go to China and Russia, and probably 2/3 of the world will accept him. So the point is he's in power. This particular decision that has been called by the ICC has hurt a very flammable situation. So you've got more people at risk today because the agencies that were there to give help are seen by Bashir now as being spies for the ICC. So he's kicking them out. I would like to call on President Bashir to reinstate all of these agencies and to stop the expulsion. These agencies, I can tell you, are good agencies. These are good people, and there's not one agency out there, not one, whose president or leader would support their agency's members being spies for anybody. Okay. And I can just say that we should do everything that we can to help the people. And as a Muslim, let me just say something to President Bashir. It is God's desire, as a Muslim, I think he would agree, to show mercy and compassion on fellow Muslims, and Darfurians are Muslims. And I would call on him to do all that he can to see that their suffering is relieved and show compassion and mercy to them. I'm a Christian. I believe that Jesus Christ is God's Son who gave his life for the sins of this world. I'm not a politician. I'm not a diplomat. I'm just a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I want to show God's kindness and his love to everyone that I can. I feel for the people of Darfur. These people have suffered greatly. And we need Mr. Bashir, we need President Bashir's help. And we need him to turn a course here and reinstate these agencies and let them go back to doing the wonderful, good work that they've been doing for many years.
Okay, Reverend Graham, I'm going to get a caller in from Washington, D.C. Sarah's on the line. Sarah, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to ask your panel, especially the one from Chicago, that there have been atrocities committed by the Westerns. For example, in Iraq, 1 million people were killed and others displaced. And then in recent time, the people in Palestine were
Okay, Sarah,
so
Sarah,
all these people.
Sarah, I see what you're getting at. I'll put this to Ambassador Williamson. We're coming close to a break. Ambassador, one of the issues a lot of viewers do express in emails, and as Sarah has said on the phone, is that there seems to be a certain amount of hypocrisy, that there's action taken against President Bashir, and yet in other parts of the world there's inequity and injustice, and yet those aren't dealt with. That the West has double standards.
Well, a couple observations. One, it is true that not every injustice is addressed by the ICC, and I hope they develop greater capacity to deal with instances of injustice. And the vast majority of the membership of the ICC are not Western countries, and as I've already said, the United States is not a member. I don't think because you can't deal with every injustice doesn't mean you have an excuse not to deal with the injustice you can deal with.
Right.
Let me make one other point in response to Reverend Graham, who I respect. But the 50,000 people whose homes were destroyed in southern Sudan, in Abyei town, and I went there and saw the smoldering ruins of that town. And they were forced to move a day's walk to Aguk and lived under plastic sheets. Many of them still there, able to return home. The Sudan Armed Forces under President Bashir chose to let them stay in their barracks and let the looting and burning go on for 3 days in May. Now, the victimization of those 50,000 people whose lives were ruined weren't after the ICC arrest warrant. So I think it's very important to note that the strategies and efforts in the past have not gotten the success either Reverend Graham, myself, or others in Africa and all over the world want to see toward progress.
Right. Ambassador, I'm going to...
The government of Sudan has the responsibility to take care of its people, and it's failing in that responsibility.
I'll get on to more, and I'll get to Reverend Graham's response in a moment. We have to take a short break here. Now, as we go to the break, I'd like to get your opinion, our viewers. In today's chat room poll, we're asking, do you think the arrest warrant for Sudan's president helps or hurts the chances for a resolution to the Darfur crisis? We'll have the results and more of our discussion in a moment, and you can join that conversation by with your questions and comments by logging on to livestation.com and entering the chat room, where you can see the debate taking place right now. Do enter the poll. We'll see you soon.